Okay, welcome back to another video on the Math channel. It's your teacher, Mr. Lim here, and in this video, we're going to be looking at how to find the gradient of a line. So the first thing we need to do is determine or define what gradient means. Gradient is a measure of how steep a slope is. So if it's sloping up from left to right, the gradient is positive. And if the line is sloping down from left to right, the gradient is negative. So by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to do these two things. Find the gradient of a line from a graph and without a graph. So let's have a look at the first one from a graph. The formula that we use to work out gradient using a graph is just gradient, or m, is equal to rise over run. So let's have a look at each of these graphs. What is the gradient of the lines below? Now, like in the previous video when we're looking at the midpoint and length of a line interval, in order for us to work out the gradient, we like to use right angle triangles again. Right angle triangles are your best friend with linear relationships. So let's create right angle triangles. We need to work out the rise. We know that this bit here is 3, but this bit here is 1 because this is minus 1. So altogether that's 4. And the run is, well, this is minus 2 according to this point. So the run has to be minus 2 to 0 is 2. So the gradient is rise over run 4 over 2, which is 2. Now, once we've done that, we need to ask ourselves, is the line sloping up or is it sloping down? From left to right. Well, from left to right, the line is sloping up, which means our gradient is positive. Now, whenever we're answering questions like this, we always use positive numbers for these lengths. Can you see here how I wrote 4 and 2? Always use positive numbers. I know here it says negative 2, but you can't have a negative length. So always use positive numbers, which means your gradient will always be positive. And then look at the graph, look at the line, see if it's sloping up or down to determine whether you need to make it positive or negative. So let's have a look at question B. We're going to draw a right angle triangle. The rise is 3. The run is 6 plus 5, which is 11. So the gradient is rise over run. Now we need to ask ourselves, is it sloping up or is it sloping down? Well, we can see from left to right, it's sloping down, which means that the gradient has to be negative. So we put a negative in front of that fraction. So the gradient for this line is negative 3 over 11. What about if we didn't have a graph? If we didn't have a graph, we would use the formula m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now you might be wondering, oh, why is it y2 minus y1 on the top? Well, if we have a look at this, the y's are on top because rise is on the top. And in order for us to work out how far it rises, can you see how we're drawing that along the y-axis? It's a vertical line, which represents the y-coordinate. The run, however, is the x. If we were to draw a line that goes across, it's parallel to the x-axis. So don't get confused. If it helps, just write the formula every single time. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Do not get confused and put the x's on top and the y's at the bottom. So let's have a look at some examples. We're going to use this formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, to find the gradient of the following pairs of points. So we'll write our formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which means we have to label these points. x1, y1, x2, y2. Well, y2 is minus 3. We're going to minus y1, which is minus 9. So when you minus 9, that becomes plus 9. x2 is 1, and we're going to minus x1, which is minus 2. So the minus 2 becomes plus 2. And so we've got 6 over 3, which is 2. The gradient is 2. which means it's sloping up because it's positive. Let's have a look at B. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Label x1, y1, x2, y2. y2 is 0. We're going to minus y1, which is minus 1. So we're going to minus 1 becomes plus 1. x2 is 0. I'm going to minus x1, which is just 7. So this gives us an S of 1 over negative 7. Or minus 1 over 7. Because it's negative, our answer tells us that this line is sloping down from left to right. Right, and let's scroll up to questions C and D. I'll get you to pause the video here, have a go yourselves, and when you're done, you can play the video to see whether you got the answers correct or not. Okay, so M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that gives us 7 minus 0 over minus 6 plus 2, which is 7 over negative 4, therefore sloping down. Question D. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Label y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 minus 1 over 4, also sloping down. And that's it for this video. So by now you should know how to find the gradient of a line from a graph and without a graph.